He hit me 7 times, 7, I counted every single one. That was my own son, the boy I worked double shifts to raise after his father walked out. He did it right there in my living room. My grandchildren were sitting on that couch. My 6-year-old granddaughter started crying before I even felt the pain. But what Marcus did not know was that I had already made a phone call, 3 days before that birthday dinner. One quiet phone call that took less than 4 minutes. By the time he drove home that night, his whole future had already been rearranged. He just did not know it yet. If you want to find out what was on the other end of that phone call, stay right here with me. And if stories like this speak to something deep inside you, hit that subscribe button because we put out a brand new story every single week. Now let me take you all the way back to the beginning, because this story did not start at that dinner table. It started almost 40 years ago in a small house on Delaney Street. My name is Patricia. Most people call me Pat. I am 63 years old and I have spent the better part of my life doing one thing, taking care of other people. That is not me complaining, that is just the truth of who I am. I grew up watching my mother stretch a dollar until it screamed. She cleaned houses 6 days a week. She never complained, she just worked. And I took that same spirit and I carried it into my own life. When my husband Raymond left me with a 4-year-old boy and an empty checking account, I did not fall apart. I got a second job. Marcus was that 4-year-old boy, and I want you to understand something before I go any further. I loved that child with everything in me, everything. I used to lie awake at night listening to him breathe just to make sure he was okay. I used to skip lunch at work so I could put a few extra dollars into his school fund. He was my whole reason for getting up in the morning. I worked as a medical records clerk during the day. At night I cleaned offices downtown. On weekends I did alterations for neighbors and anyone who needed it. I did that for 11 years. 11 years of double shifts and sore hands and falling asleep at the kitchen table. Also, Marcus could have what I never had. And I have to say, for a long time it worked. Marcus was a good kid. He got decent grades. He played baseball in high school. He was polite to adults. He called me every Sunday when he went off to college. I was proud of him, genuinely proud. But somewhere between 25 and 35, something shifted in my son. I cannot tell you exactly when it happened. I cannot point to one moment and say that is where I lost him. But by the time he was in his mid-30s, he had become someone I barely recognized. It started small, little things. He would cancel plans at the last minute and not apologize. He would borrow money and take weeks to pay it back. He started talking to me differently, less respectful, more impatient, like I was an inconvenience instead of his mother. I told myself it was stress. He had a demanding job in real estate. He had 2 kids of his own. His wife Diane was a handful, and I say that with all the charity I can manage. I made excuses for him because that is what mothers do. We protect our children from our own pain. We absorb it so they do not have to feel it. But you can only absorb so much before it starts coming back out of you. Let me tell you about the house, because the house is important. About 8 years ago, when Marcus and Diane were just starting out and money was tight, I made a decision that I thought would help them. I used the money I had saved over 30 years. $114,000. Every single cent I had put away from those double shifts and those weekend alterations and all those lunches I skipped. I bought a house, put it in my name, told Marcus and Diane they could live there, build their life there, and when the time was right, it would become theirs. I was not asking for rent. I was not asking for anything. I just wanted to help my son stand up straight. They moved in, they painted the walls. They put a swing set in the backyard for the grandkids. Marcus would call me sometimes and say, "Mom, this house means everything to us." Those words meant the world to me. I thought I had done something real, something lasting. What I did not know was what was being said about me behind my back. I found out slowly, the way you always find out the truth, in little pieces that do not make sense at first. Then one day you hold them all together and the picture becomes very, very clear. My daughter-in-law Diane had a sister named Rochelle. Rochelle and I were never close, but we were always cordial, civil. We would talk at family gatherings, nothing deep but nothing cold either. About 2 years ago, Rochelle called me out of the blue. She sounded nervous. She said she had something to tell me and she hoped I would not be angry with her for saying it. She told me that Diane had been telling people in the family that I gave them the house as a gift, a done deal, their property. She said Diane was telling people that I had promised to sign it over. She said Marcus had been backing Diane up on all of it, telling cousins and aunts and anyone who would listen that the house was already theirs in every way that mattered and that I was just being difficult by keeping my name on the deed. I sat with that for a long time after I hung up. I did not call Marcus that night. I did not call Diane. I just sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea that went cold and I thought about all the years, all the shifts, all the lunches I skipped, all the times I stayed up late making sure that boy had everything. I eventually did bring it up with Marcus, calmly. I called him on a Sunday like normal and I just asked him directly. I said, Marcus, have you been telling people that house belongs to you? He got very quiet. Then he said, Mom, it basically does. You gave it to us. I said, no. I said, I let you live there. There is a difference. He said, you are being difficult. Then he changed the subject like it was nothing. That was the first crack, the first real one, and once a crack opens up, it does not close, it only gets wider. Over the next year and a half, things between Marcus and me got colder. He stopped calling on Sundays. He started missing family dinners. When I would come over to see my grandchildren, Diane would make me feel like a guest who had overstayed. She would be busy. She would have somewhere to be. She would sit Marcus down in the other room, and 10 minutes later he would come out and tell me the kids were tired. I kept coming anyway, because those grandchildren were my heart. My granddaughter Sophia was 6 years old and she had these big brown eyes that looked exactly like Marcus did when he was little. My grandson Eli was 9 and he loved building things. He was always showing me something he had made, a little bridge out of popsicle sticks, a rocket out of cardboard. I was not going to let whatever was happening with Marcus take those babies away from me. But things kept getting worse. Marcus started making comments, small ones at first, things like, Ma, you know you are not getting any younger, maybe you should think about a smaller place. Or Ma, you have been holding onto that property a long time, maybe it is time to make it official. I understood what he was saying underneath the words. He was not worried about me, he was worried about the house. I started keeping notes. I know that sounds extreme, but something in me knew things were building towards something, so I started writing things down, dates, things he said, things Diane said when I was there. I kept a little notebook in my kitchen drawer. I did not know exactly what I was preparing for, I just knew I needed to be ready. Then came the birthday dinner. Marcus's 42nd birthday. I organized it, of course I did. I booked a private room at a restaurant, I invited family, I paid for the whole thing. I spent 3 days cooking extra dishes to bring along because Marcus had always loved my food. I made his favorite, baked chicken with the lemon and herbs the way his grandmother used to make. I made his favorite cake, the one with the almond frosting. I did all of this because he was my son and I loved him and I still believed, I still truly believed, that somewhere underneath all the coldness was the boy I raised. I got to the restaurant early, set everything up. My sister Dorothy was there, my cousin Yvette, Marcus's uncle from my side Gerald, a few of his friends, and of course Diane and the 2 kids. Sophia and Eli sat next to me when Marcus arrived. He hugged people, he laughed. For about the first 30 minutes everything felt almost normal, almost like the old days. Then after dinner, after the cake, after everyone was just sitting and talking, Diane made a comment. She said it loud enough for the table to hear. She said, Patricia, now that Marcus is 42, don't you think it's time you stopped playing games with our house? The whole table went quiet. I felt my sister Dorothy go stiff next to me. I kept my face calm. I looked at Diane and I said, this is not the time or the place. She said, you always say that. You always find a reason to put it off. You've been stringing us along for 8 years. I said, Diane, we can talk about this privately. Not here, not in front of the children. She said, why not here? She said, everyone at this table knows what you've been doing. I looked at Marcus. I looked at my son and I waited for him to say something, to tell his wife to stop, to take my side just once, to be my son for 30 seconds. He looked at me and he said, Ma, she's right, just sign the house over, stop being selfish. Selfish, that word hit me somewhere deep. I felt something shift inside me, not anger exactly, something quieter and colder than an Jur. I said, Marcus, I am not going to do this here. I stood up. I was going to walk away. I was going to take the high road the way I had been taking it for 2 years. He grabbed my arm, he pulled me back into my seat. I said, let go of me. He did not. He was angry in a way I had never seen before. His face was red. His jaw was tight. He said, you are not walking away from this conversation. What happened next is hard to describe. It happened fast and it happened in front of everyone. He struck me, open hand across my shoulder and my face, not once. He struck me again and again. I heard Sophia start crying before I even processed the pain. I heard Dorothy yelling. I heard chairs scraping back. By the time Marcus was pulled away by his uncle Gerald, I had been hit 7 times. I counted afterward because my brain needed something to hold on to. I did not cry, I want you to know that. I sat very still. I looked at my hands on the table. I could hear people around me, voices, Sophia crying, Dorothy saying, oh my God, Marcus breathing hard, Diane not saying a single word. I stood up slowly, I picked up my purse. I looked at Marcus and I said nothing, not one word. I kissed Sophia on the top of her head. I told Eli I loved him. I walked out. And as I walked to my car, I was completely calm. Because 3 days before that dinner, before I even knew how bad that night would be, I had already made a phone call. And that phone call had already set something in motion that Marcus had absolutely no idea about. Let me tell you about the 3 days before. I need to back up a little. About 6 weeks before the birthday dinner, I had a conversation with my friend Agnes. Agnes and I had been friends for 22 years. She used to be a paralegal before she retired. She knew a lot about property law, not everything but enough to point me in the right direction. I had gone to her house for coffee and I had told her everything. The comments Marcus was making, the way Diane was talking to people, the way the atmosphere had been shifting for months. Agnes listened to all of it. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she looked at me and she said, "Pat, do you know what your rights are with that property?" I said, "I know my name is on the deed." She said, "That is the beginning, not the end." She said, "You need to talk to a real estate attorney, not a general lawyer, someone who handles property specifically." She gave me a name. I called that attorney the next day. Her name was Karen Osai, sharp woman. She listened to my situation and she laid it out plain and simple. She said, "Patricia, that house is in your name. It is your asset. There are no contracts, no lease agreements, nothing that creates a legal obligation for you to transfer it." She said, "The only thing stopping you from selling it, renting it, or doing whatever you want with it is your own choice." I sat with that for a few weeks. I was not ready to make a move yet. I was still hoping things would get better. That is the thing about love. It makes you wait longer than you should. But then about a week before the birthday dinner, Marcus called me. He did not call to chat. He called to tell me that he and Diane had already spoken to a real estate agent about my house, their house as he called it. He said they were planning to refinance. They needed me to sign some paperwork. He said it matter-of-factly, like it was already decided, like I was just a formality. That was the moment something inside me went very quiet and very clear. I did not argue with him on the phone. I said, "Okay, Marcus, I will look into it." I hung up. And then I called Karen Osai back. I told her I was ready. I said I wanted to list the house. I wanted to start the process. She walked me through everything. She told me that since Marcus and Diane had no lease, no rent agreement, and no legal claim to the property, they were essentially tenants at will, meaning I had the right to sell and they would be required to vacate in accordance with standard notice requirements in our state. She also told me something I had not thought about. She said if I wanted to move quickly and quietly, the smart move was to list with an investor rather than going through the open market. Faster process, cash offer, less time for things to get complicated. I said let's do it. 3 days before Marcus's birthday dinner on a Thursday morning, Karen and I met with a real estate investment company. I signed a purchase agreement. Cash offer, good price, not top dollar but fair. The closing date was set for 31 days out. By the time I sat at that birthday table, the house was already sold, pending closing. Marcus and Diane were living in a house that had already been purchased by someone else. They just did not know it yet. I went to that dinner knowing what I knew. That is why I was so calm when Diane started. That is why I did not cry when Marcus raised his hand. That is why I walked out without a single word. Because I did not need words anymore. The paperwork had already spoken. The day after the dinner, I called my attorney and told her what had happened. I also called my sister Dorothy, who had witnessed everything. Dorothy said, "Pat, we need to file a police report." I said, "I know." She drove me to the station that morning. I want to be honest with you. Filing that report was one of the hardest things I have ever done. Standing in a police station and saying my son hit me. That sentence felt like it was tearing something out of me. The officer was kind. She did not rush me. She took everything down. 7 strikes. Witnesses present. Public location. The report was filed. Marcus did not know that either. 2 days later, Karen sent the formal notice to the property. It was addressed to all occupants. It stated that the property had been sold and that they had 30 days to vacate in accordance with the terms of the sale. I was told Marcus called the investment company directly. He told them he was the owner's son and that there had been some kind of mistake. They told him politely that they had a signed purchase agreement with the titled owner and that he should direct any questions to his own legal counsel. He called me 17 times that day. I did not answer. I let every call go to voicemail. I did not listen to the voicemails for a week. When I finally did, they went through every stage. Anger, disbelief, bargaining, blame. He called me selfish. He called me cruel. In one message, his voice cracked and he sounded for just a moment like the boy he used to be. That one hurt. I will not pretend it did not. But I thought about Sophia crying at that table. I thought about my shoulder aching for 3 days after. I thought about 30 years of skipped lunches and double shifts, and the moment he looked me in the eye and called me selfish for the very first time. And I let the voicemails run out. Dorothy had been helping me document everything since the night of the dinner. She had taken photos at the restaurant. She had already written out her own witness statement for my attorney. What we had was solid. When Marcus eventually did get a lawyer and that lawyer sent a letter trying to claim some form of equitable interest in the property based on years of residence and improvements made, Karen was ready. She had everything. No lease. No financial contribution documentation from Marcus toward the purchase price. No written agreement of any kind. The claim went nowhere. The sale closed on schedule. The investment company took possession. Marcus and Diane had moved out by day 28. I was told by Gerald, my uncle who had been at the dinner and who stayed neutral but kept in touch with me, that they were renting an apartment about 12 miles away, that Diane was furious, that they had not stopped fighting since the notice arrived. I did not feel good about that. I want to make that clear. I take no pleasure in knowing those children, my grandchildren, had to move. Sophia and Eli did not deserve any of this. That part sat heavy on me and still does. But I also knew this. Children who grow up watching a father hit their grandmother need to see that actions have weight, that you do not get to hurt people and keep everything they gave you. That is not a punishment. That is a lesson. And one day when those kids are older, I hope they understand the difference. Now let me tell you what I did with the money from the sale. Karen had advised me early on to think carefully about this. She said once the sale closes, what you do next sends a message to, not just to Marcus but to yourself, about what you believe you deserve. I thought about that a lot. The first thing I did was set up an education trust, for Sophia and for Eli. Each of them has an account that they can access when they turn 18, for college or for trade school or for a first home down payment, whatever they need to stand up straight in the world. I set it up through a third-party trustee so Marcus and Diane have no access to it, but the children will have it when the time comes. That part felt right. That part felt like me. The second thing I did was finally, for the first time in my adult life, buy a home for myself. Not for someone else. For me, a small house, 2 bedrooms, a garden in the back, a kitchen with enough light in the morning that it almost makes you feel like the day is already going well. I closed on it 6 weeks after the property sale finished. The first night I slept there, I lay in bed and I thought about my mother stretching that dollar. I thought about those double shifts. I thought about 30 years of putting other people first. And I slept better than I had in years. The third thing I did was reach out to a family counselor. Not for Marcus, for me. I had things inside me I needed to sort through, grief mostly. Because losing a version of your child, even when they are standing right in front of you, is till a kind of grief. The counselor was a quiet man named Dr. Traore. He never told me what to feel, he just sat with me while I figured it out. As for Marcus and the assault, the case was reviewed by the district attorney's office. Given the witness statements, the police report, and the documentation my attorney had gathered, Marcus was charged with simple assault. It was not a felony. I was not trying to send my son to prison, but I needed it on record. I needed the world to know that what happened that night was real and it was wrong. He was given a fine and mandatory anger management counseling as part of a diversion program. Dorothy told me he completed it. I have no way of knowing if it changed anything inside him. That is between Marcus and whatever is left of his conscience. He tried to contact me through Gerald about 4 months after everything settled. Gerald came to me carefully, respectfully, said Marcus wanted to talk. I told Gerald I appreciated him coming to me and I told him I was not ready. Gerald nodded. He did not push. He said just let me know when that changes. I do not know if it ever will. I genuinely do not know. What I know is this. I am 63 years old and I am sitting in my own home. A home that belongs to me. A home where I did not have to skip lunch to afford it. A home where no one can knock on my door and tell me I am being selfish for something I built with my own hands and my own years. My granddaughter Sophia calls me sometimes. Diane allows it, which tells me that somewhere in all of this, even Diane understands that those children need their grandmother. Sophia told me the last time we spoke that she misses my chicken, the lemon and herb one. I told her I would make it for her soon. She said promise. I said I promise. That is the thing about love that is real. It does not disappear just because it got hurt. It just learns to protect itself better. I am not angry anymore. I want to be clear about that. Anger is heavy and I have carried heavy things long enough. What I feel now is something more like a clean tiredness. The kind you feel when a long job is finally finished. When you have done what needed doing and you can sit down at last. I worked 40 years for other people. I bent myself in half so that the people I loved could stand up straight. And when I finally drew a line, when I finally said this is mine and I will decide what happens to it, I was called selfish. I was struck by my own child. I was expected to just absorb it the way I had absorbed everything else. But I had a notebook in my kitchen drawer, and I had a phone, and I had 31 days. Sometimes that is all it takes. A little preparation, a little patience, and the willingness to finally, after all these years, put yourself first. If you know someone who needs to hear this story, share it with them. And if you are sitting somewhere right now carrying something too heavy, I hope this reminds you that you are allowed to set it down. You are allowed to draw that line. You are allowed to make that phone call. And if the people who were supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you the most, just remember this. Your name on that deed means something. It always did. They just hoped you would forget. Patricia did not forget. And neither should you.